Happy Saturday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. It's a very exciting episode today, I think. Very interesting. It was a lot of fun to put this together. So let's jump in. And like I said, it's Saturday, so today's video will be very foreign policy and ideology heavy. But first, we cover a development related to the Chinese economy. It's an update on a topic which we have been following for some time. This week, Chinese financial media outlet Caixin published an excellent report on the local government debt and fiscal situation, writing that 9 provincial-level governments across China plan to raise a combined 410 billion yuan, $56 billion, through special bonds to swap their hidden liabilities, bringing them onto the books. Quote, as Beijing pushes ahead with its plans to tackle localities' trillions of dollars of implicit debt. End quote. The special refinancing bonds were scheduled to be issued between Monday, that is Monday this week, and the 18th of October, with maturities ranging from 3 to 30 years. The outlet, citing unnamed sources, writes that the proceeds will be used mostly to pay off various types of off-balance sheet debts, including high-interest liabilities and local government financing vehicle bonds, which are not recorded in local budgets. Some proceeds will be used for paying government arrears owed to businesses. Regular viewers will remember that this is an issue the government has been focused on for some time, this issue of government arrears owed to businesses, now in the billions of dollars. This has very much become the source of concern for Beijing, as it not only weighs on business confidence, but is beginning to provoke fears of systemic financial risks. We remember that the State Council recently ordered provincial-level governments to pay the money they owe to businesses. Caixin writes that despite this new round of swap bond issuance, quote, there is still a vast amount of debt to be transmuted to on-budget government bonds, much of which was issued by local government financing vehicles. Debt is also hidden in public-private partnership projects, shady loan contracts, and other channels used by local governments to raise money. End quote. We remember that local government hidden debt in China is estimated to be anywhere from 30 trillion yuan to more than 70 trillion yuan, almost 10 trillion US dollars. It is thus unsurprising that, as the outlet writes, policymakers have become increasingly concerned with the risks posed by off-balance sheet borrowing recently, quote, as local governments nurse fiscal budgets riddled with holes after years of costly COVID controls and a prolonged property crisis. The main holders of local government financing vehicle debt include banks and insurance companies, so any large-scale defaults could stabilize the financial system. End quote. Indeed, some analysts have called this local government debt and fiscal crisis a slow-moving financial crisis. Meanwhile, we remember that one of the most acute pressures on local government fiscal conditions is the collapse in land use sales caused by the ongoing property crisis. Land use sales served as a critical source of extra budgetary revenue for local governments for years. We've covered this in depth in multiple videos in the past. The sale of land usage rights reached 6.7 trillion yuan, 921 billion US dollars last year, down 23% over 2021, and it seems that the same trend has been observed this year too. Chinese financial media outlet Yicai published a report finding that the revenue that local governments in China raised from selling land rights from January to September fell 20% this year compared with 2022, quote, as developers grew increasingly cautious amid an uncertain outlook for the nation's property market. End quote. This is just the average drop too. Some localities saw especially painful collapses in sales. According to a report by Beijing-based investment bank Minsheng Securities, income from sales of land use rights in Qinghai, Gansu, and Xinjiang more than halved during the same period. Revenues in Fujian, Shandong, Hubei, Anhui, Hunan, Chongqing, Shanxi, Inner Mongolia, and Guizhou plunged over 40%. Tianjin, Ningxia, Jiangsu, Beijing, and Zhejiang made gains. We end part 1 of today's video with this observation. Quote, it is worth noting that the impact on fiscal spending is much greater than a 20% decline in revenues might suggest. Remember that, according to the Ministry of Finance, the listed revenues are net of infrastructure and other spending needed to develop the land before sales. More than half of the local revenues from land sales can go towards these expenditures, so that lower land sales result not only in lower net revenues for local governments, but also lower fiscal spending prior to the land sales. End quote. Next up, China and the Philippines continue to make waves in the South China Sea. As some of you already know, China Update is now on Twitter. This is a great way for me to share episodes in smaller bite-sized portions, to share important articles or make smaller observations in text form, or to make urgent announcements about the main channel, which is still on YouTube. Twitter ends up, or X ends up being a better platform to communicate some of these messages to you guys, to the audience. So if you are on X and you're already following China Update, maybe consider following China Update over on Twitter as well, at Tony China Update. The link is also in the description below. This is a great way for me to continue communicating the most up-to-date analysis and updates and messages about the channel on that platform. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit the like button. Share this episode with someone who you think would enjoy it if you want to help the channel grow. And for the 50% of regular viewers who are not subscribed, subscribing is also a big help for the channel too. And for anyone who wants to go the extra mile and help me keep China Update financially sustainable, this channel relies primarily on subscriber support. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. This is a huge help, and it does help me continue making these episodes every day, open and free for everyone. Once again, for everyone, for all the support, thank you very, very much. Let's continue. Next up, Sino-Philippines friction on the South China Sea continues this week. As a potential flashpoint in the region, we need to take note of the developments there. On Tuesday, the China Coast Guard said that it expelled a Philippine Navy ship near Scarborough Shoal, with the state-run Global Times writing, quote, "The latest trespass came after several similar attempts since August, as the Philippines repeatedly attempted to send building materials to China's Renai Reef to reinforce a Philippine warship illegally grounded there since 1999. However, observers noted that the previous events featured Philippine Coast Guard and government vessels and were reciprocally dealt with by the Chinese Coast Guard, but the latest event was prompted by a Philippine Navy warship." End quote. However, the Philippines, a US ally, has rejected this explanation, with the Philippine Armed Forces Chief Romeo Brawner Jr. telling media the same day, quote, "We are having it verified, but nothing like that happened. In our view, it's Chinese propaganda." End quote. Like I said, this is a space that we need to follow very closely. The next few months will frankly be quite dangerous, and the world is distracted by other crises. Quote, "The situation around Second Thomas Shoal may be the riskiest spot over the next several months, as the ship the Philippines intentionally grounded and that houses Philippine Marines may break apart before the end of the year unless the Philippines can deliver more concrete and other construction materials and structurally reinforce the outpost. The PRC has blocked recent attempts to deliver construction materials, and it appears their strategy is to wait until the ship breaks apart and then swoop in to declare possession. The Philippines are unlikely to be able to deliver needed materials to the ship without US assistance. As much as people want to delay forcing the issue, nature will probably force it in the next several months. The Philippines' use of what Sea Light terms assertive transparency to show the world the PRC's behavior in the South China Sea seems to be upsetting the PRC, as it raises the public profile of the disputes and the risks." End quote. And finally for today, and this week, we examine ideology. I know for some this content may seem very dry, which is why I normally wait until Saturday to discuss it with a more core China Update audience, but I believe it is super important to follow, which is why we need to cover it. It involves hours and hours of reviewing Chinese documents on my end. Indeed, it takes several days for me to be able to put this ideology part together, but I do think it is worth it. I hope you all get some value from this part of the video. Beijing recently held its National Propaganda and Ideological and Cultural Work Conference, and during the event it was confirmed that Xi Jinping thought on culture is now official. joining the existing ideological suite of Xi Jinping thought systems on the economy, diplomacy, military, environment, and legal affairs. The National Propaganda, Ideological and Cultural Work Conference is held every 5 years, and it used to be called the National Propaganda and Ideological Work Conference. The addition of cultural work to the title, commentators argue, suggests that this so-called Xi Jinping thought on culture will be a big deal. That is, Beijing is going to push it hard. So what is Xi Jinping thought on culture? Well, it's still a little nebulous, and we may have to wait and see how Beijing formulates its articulation in the coming months. For now, though, let's examine how leadership and state media are discussing it, as well as some views from analysts. Let's start with Xi Jinping himself. In his instructions made public at the national meeting, Xi made several requirements across 7 aspects, which I'm now quoting directly. 1. Strengthening the party's leadership over the work of public communication and culture. 2. Developing a socialist ideology that has the power to unite and inspire the people. 3. Cultivating and applying core socialist values. 4. Strengthening the penetration and credibility of the media and its ability to guide and influence. 5. Promoting the creative transformation and development of fine traditional Chinese culture. 6. Vigorously developing the cultural sector. And 7. Enhancing international communication capacity and promoting exchanges and mutual learning among civilizations. According to state-run Xinhua, General Secretary Xi Jinping expressed that, and again this is a direct quote, "In a new era and on a long new journey, the evolution of changes with a multitude unseen in a century is accelerating across the world. The Chinese nation has entered a critical period for its great rejuvenation and the juxtaposition of strategic opportunities as well as risks and challenges. The work of public communication and culture is facing new situations and tasks, and thus those in the sector must take on a new look and make greater progress in this regard. To fulfill the new cultural mission of advancing cultural prosperity, building a leading country in culture, and developing a modern Chinese civilization at a new historical standing point, it is a must to have a stronger cultural confidence, follow the approach of openness and inclusiveness, and uphold fundamental principles and break new ground." Han Qiang, Dean of the School of Marxism at the Beijing Foreign Studies University, expressed on the new ideology, quote, "With the nation's traditional culture being revitalized, the level of cultural confidence among the people has been brought to an unprecedented level, and the unity among society has been lifted." End quote. On Wednesday, flagship party mouthpiece, The People's Daily, published a page-1 commentary on the ideology called "Deeply Studying and Putting into Practice Xi Jinping Thought on Culture," writing, quote, "The prosperity of culture leads to the prosperity of the country, and with a strong culture makes a strong nation." End quote. The State Ethnic Affairs Commission held a meeting this week, quote, "to deeply study and implement the spirit of the National Propaganda, Ideology and Cultural Work Conference," end quote, which concluded, quote, "We must take Xi Jinping thought on culture as a guide and further deepen our understanding of the outstanding characteristics of Chinese civilization, the Chinese national community, the history of interaction, communication, and integration of the Chinese nation, as well as the roots and the soul of literature and artistic work," end quote. We can also look back at previous authoritative pieces on the role of culture in ideology to help us understand which way this new so-called Xi Jinping thought on culture is going. For example, one of the best places to look is 九世, which is a top theoretical or ideological journal for the party, the 13th issue of which was released earlier this year, highlights, quote, "building a socialist cultural power," end quote, in its article, "A New Cultural Mission Developing a Modern Chinese Civilization," which wrote at the time, quote, "Xi Jinping has pointed out, given the rich foundations of our more than 5,000-year-old civilization, only by integrating the basic tenets of Marxism with China's specific realities and with its traditional culture can we pioneer and develop Chinese socialism. Although Marxism and traditional Chinese culture have different origins, they are highly compatible. Genuine integration can only be achieved with such compatibility, and it will contribute to the success of both sides. Integration is not about piecing different components together, nor is it a simplistic physical convergence. It necessitates comprehensive fusion, giving birth to a new, organically knitted cultural unity. It has enabled Marxism to truly take root in China, helping modernize traditional Chinese culture and facilitated the emergence of a new culture that serves as a cultural form for Chinese modernization." End quote. 九世 published another article titled "The Two Integrations, the Only Path and Strongest Assurance for Our Success," which touched on similar themes. And on these similar themes too, we also note the launch of a new TV show called When Marx Meets Confucius. Made up of 5 episodes, each about 30 minutes in length, the show dramatizes Marx and Confucius meeting at an academy with experts and students discussing philosophy, both ancient and modern, Eastern and Western. Let us end this part and today's episode with this observation. Quote, "Xi Jinping thought on culture is perhaps the most important and most encompassing of the whole Xi Jinping thought system. Xi has been trying to build this crucial bridge from the party to the people's hearts and minds. Compared to other tactical or strategic aspects of Xi Jinping thought, the cultural aspect is much more fundamental to the party's leadership. It wants to strengthen the party's own ideological framework, boost the confidence of the Chinese people in the Chinese way of governance, while spreading the appeal of Chinese culture and the China model internationally." End quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you all back here for more China Update next week on Monday.